Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Suggett, and I'm the Executive Director of CARSP, and I'm welcoming you to today's webinar, which is entitled Vision Zero Guelph, Canada's First High-Risk Network Analysis. And I will be introducing the two staff from the City of Guelph in just a minute. We're very excited to have them, and this will be no doubt a very interesting and inspiring webinar. But before I get to that, I would first of all just like to talk a little bit about our association and these webinars. So we are a national road safety association that is multidisciplinary, and we are dedicated to supporting road safety professionals across Canada. One of the ways we do that is by providing such benefits as webinars. So we do provide monthly webinars free to our membership, and it is just $50 for non-members. But because membership is so affordable at $125 a year, you see it's definitely the best deal to become a member. So we do offer, as I say, monthly webinars, but we do take a break over the summer. So we will not be offering one in July or August, but we will resume in September. Now, before I introduce our two speakers, I just want to talk a little bit about the housekeeping items. The first one of which is that after the presentation, which is going to be about 35 minutes, they will be entertaining questions, and the way you provide questions to them is through the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So if you can load them in at any time, but once again, we won't be asking them though until the end of the presentation. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we do run a feedback survey at the end of every webinar. And the purpose of this is for you to give some feedback on today's presenters, and as well to give your ideas on any potential topics for future webinars. So we highly encourage you to participate in that. And as an incentive, we do have a $25 Teams gift card that we'd encourage you to might encourage you to participate. So without further ado, I am now going to introduce our two speakers. So Nika Koning is the Transportation Safety Specialist for the City of Guelph in Ontario. He works at the intersection of equity, mobility, and placemaking. Nico holds a Master of Education in Adult Education and Community Development from the University of Toronto and a Master of Urban and Regional Planning from Queen's. The second speaker is Reza Amingafuri. Sorry about that. He's a transportation engineering data analyst with the City of Guelph and a PhD candidate in transportation engineering at the University of Waterloo. His work and research primarily focus on road safety projects, bridging the gap between practical applications and academic research. Reza's expertise lies in leveraging various data analysis techniques, including statistical and machine learning models, to address the complex transportation challenges. His dual role in municipal government and academia allows him to contribute to both immediate urban transportation needs and long-term advancements in research within the field. So welcome to the two of you, and I believe Nico is going to be starting us off. So over to you, Nico.
Thanks, Brenda. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for having Reza and I speak with you about the City of Guelph's new Vision Zero action plan, with the heart of our presentation being our high-risk network. I'll speak to its background, and Reza will go into the details. Let me begin by stating a fact that I'm sure you're all very well aware of. There is a public health crisis in Canada. In 2023, almost 2,000 people died on our roads, and it has roughly been the same number of casualties every year for the past 10 years. By no means do I want to make light of this fact. That said, it feels as though we sometimes respond to this crisis, as serious as it is, as though we are playing a game. That game being whack-a-mole. Whack-a-mole is an old arcade game where a mole pops up its head, and then another mole pops up, and then another, You don't know when the head is going to pop up. It's all a bit random. You need to bop each mole on its head with a giant foam hammer as soon as possible to win. When a serious collision occurs, I believe we collectively play whack-a-mole. By that I mean a collision creates a data set that we investigate, review, interpret, and try to address so as to make sure that collision doesn't happen again in the same location. That intention is good, and we have no doubt saved thousands of lives following this approach. But here's the problem. The collision data we have is just the tip of the iceberg for understanding the full context. Starting at the bottom of the iceberg and representing the highest number of incidents are near misses and generally unsafe acts that surround us. You may not have been hit by a car, but I'm certain you or someone you know was either very close or was witness to an action that, in the right circumstance, would certainly have been deadly. We can all think about those times. We don't have that data, even though the difference between a collision happening and not happening is just a matter of inches or seconds. The fact that it almost happened should be captured somehow. Even if a serious collision happens, it may never be reported. Some people don't feel comfortable reporting incidents to the authorities. Many even feel intimidated to do so. Data is also limited in the cases of hit and runs. No car, no collision data. In Guelph, looking at emergency department data, we found our collision data involving people whose bike was underreported by 30%. Of the reported collisions that do get counted, it is heavily weighted, often for insurance purposes, towards documenting the damage done to the vehicles alone, not the details of the people involved. And that fraction of data left is all a guess, because collision data is only captured after it occurs. The exact circumstances are left unknown. So we're left with one mole, and we whack it. But here's the thing. It's going to come back somewhere else. Fixing the problem in one spot doesn't fix it somewhere else. In Guelph, 1/4 of collisions causing injuries that we analyzed were repeat locations. The rest had never occurred in that same location. But we do regularly point out what remains, and we often highlight it in our messages to the public, like this one created by the city of Guelph a few years back, showing the locations with the highest percentage of collisions causing injuries. What might be some of the takeaways when someone reads these maps? I'm not sure, but some thoughts could be most places, if you look at this map, most places are safe. Only tragedies need our special attention. Your concerns don't count if there's no data. And waiting around is how we know there's a problem when the problems keep emerging. We can't wait anymore. We can't wait multiple years for significant trends to be analyzed, interpreted, and recommended. This runs entirely against the principles of Vision Zero, which states that no loss of life is acceptable. If we don't know the cause and the solution, waiting to investigate each incident would make sense. But that's not the case. We know the cause and we know the most effective solution. According to the Safe System Pyramid, a new public health framework for road safety, the root cause of all injuries and deaths on our roads is the transfer of kinetic energy to our bodies. And the most effective solutions and actions at a population level are actions that enhance the built environment and socioeconomic conditions. Reacting to each mole to pop up when we know how the game is played is morally unjustifiable. The other approach that we must take is to be proactive, predictive, and preventative. This approach guided Guelph's first action plan for safe streets, which was approved this year by Guelph City Council. It's a plain language report, and it reads more like an infographic than a technical document. It emphasizes data, equity considerations, and public health frameworks. A big part of its story is introducing the idea of risk and how we can understand risk in relation to how people get around Guelph. It contains 68 Vision Zero actions and Guelph's first high-risk network, also called the HRN. This is the HRN. The high-risk network is a data set and public map that helps direct 10 of our 68 Vision Zero actions. Every kilometer of Guelph's 600-kilometer street network was evaluated using known risk factors causing serious injuries and deaths. Before we get into how it's made, I'd like to share some background into its evolution. For over a decade, Vision Zero cities in the United States have created maps and data sets that have attempted to prioritize and communicate areas of higher risk. To start, the message was very simple. Traffic violence doesn't happen on every road. Here's one of the first high injury networks, sometimes called a HIN, made by the city of San Francisco in 2013. They highlighted segments with the highest concentration of injuries affecting people who walk, and they found out that 6% of their streets account for 60% of its severe and fatal pedestrian injuries. Since then, dozens of other cities across the states have taken a similar approach, sometimes called a high injury network, high injury or high crash corridor, or priority corridors. It isn't just cities too. The states of California, Oregon, and New Mexico have created state-level policy guidance for creating high injury networks and high injury maps for their entire state. We applied the same injury concentration approach when we started our work and found that 83% of all serious injuries and fatalities happened on only 10% of Guelph's roads in a 5-year period. The approach and application has shifted since it began. Here in San Francisco's latest high injury network from 2022, which adds areas of concern featured in yellow here, essentially equity-related factors for people's voices who are often underrepresented in municipal transportation policy, while injuries are often overrepresented. High injury networks also directed actions. So again, for San Francisco's high injury network, directs quick build initiatives, road reconstruction capital budgets, public engagement work, and their own key performance indicators. In Canada, the city of Edmonton was the first municipality to create a high injury network. I'll note here that an approach that's fairly common to see now, separation of injuries by road users. Here, the city of Edmonton's safe mobility strategy notes the highest concentration of injury by modes traveled. Outside of Edmonton, the only other public injury network that I am aware of in Canada was the analysis performed by UBC for the city of Vancouver in 2022, which includes equity-related factors, but it is also unclear if this work has directly informed municipal policy. While not public yet, it is also known that the city of Toronto and the city of Montreal are both working towards creating their own types of network maps. Whether these are public or internal use only, I'm not so sure yet. Also, it's worth noting private companies that have created their own types of risk and injury identification methodologies. Here, I'll mention the work of SEMA Plus and Urban Logic. A recent shift has been moving towards identifying risk, not merely concentrated injuries in the high injury network, to create what's called a high risk network, or HRN. The map pictured here is from the city of Omaha, which made this map in 2023, features risk scores instead of injuries and fatalities. As far as I can tell, there are at least 10 US cities that also use the term high risk network, emerging only within the past 3 years. High risk networks often live alongside high injury networks and can be complemented visually by other mode specific high injury networks. They often use a mix of historical collision and equity related data and generally attempt to expand upon other known risk factors. Whatever you call it, though, integrating collision data with public health data, demographic data, and other types of risk factor data, and integrating these into a map and data set to direct internal policies while also communicating them to public audiences, that whole shebang there, that idea is considered one of the best ways to create a Vision Zero program according to the Vision Zero network. And the Vision Zero network, by the way, has spoken a lot about developing how to develop a HIN or a HERN system for yourself. In summary, here are some key themes of these types of network maps. Every network is different. By that, I mean there's no standard methodology for creating a HIN or a HERN. And each initiative has taken a unique approach to identifying its data sets, road segments, weighting variables, and determining thresholds. Reza will speak about that soon. The practice is led exclusively by cities that have already embraced Vision Zero and the safe system approach. All network maps aim to highlight a minority of roadways that contain a majority of injuries or a higher concentration of risk. Most networks focus on corridors, but others also include intersections as well. Most use about 3 to 5 years worth of recent collision data to inform their network maps. The latest approaches aim to create a network map and dataset as a means to proactively prioritize infrastructure and engagement efforts in ways that ultimately aim to prevent future harm from occurring. They're also used as a communication tool, as a way of illustrating risk to the general public and also the city's proactive response. With no clear standard and very limited examples in Canada, we had to create our own approach. So here's where I'll pass it off to Reza to show you what we did in Guelph.
Yeah, thanks, Nico. Before we dive into the technical steps, let's go through these 4 questions, which are a roadmap for building the high-risk network in Guelph. I'm not going to unpack the answer to each one right now. Just know they set the stage. So firstly, we need to figure out how do we select the evaluation criteria and assign weights to each one. The second question is that what roadway segment length provides the right balance between resolution and data stability? Also, we need to answer how should collisions occurring at or near intersections be handled? Should we assign them to roadway segments or run a separate intersection-specific model? And last but not least, also we need to answer what cutoff score will define the prioritized network and how we will explain the threshold to the stakeholders. As we talk through the model in the next slides, you will see exactly how we answer every question, how we pick the criteria, set the segment lengths, handle intersection collisions, and choose the cutoff scores. So for the moment, just keep this in the back of your minds, the answers coming up in the context. As you can see here, we have just laid out the 4 big questions that will steer the high-risk network work in Guelph. Now, before we dive into answering them, let me show you the roadmap we followed to build the model itself. Picture here on the slide shows a 5-layer pyramid. Each layer is one phase in the process. And we climb from the base up to the tip. At the very bottom, you see defined criteria and sub-criteria. This is where we decided what risk means for our city. We listed the factors we care about and broke them into measurable pieces. Once the ingredients were clear, we moved up to the data preparation and normalization. Here we pulled all the required data and cleaned, matched, and rescaled the numbers so they could sit side by side without any one factor overpowering the rest. We tied the apple-to-apple data. We climbed to the middle layer, which is the analytic hierarchical process, or AHP. Think of AHP as a structured conversation in mass form. It lets us compare each factor against the other, set defensible weights, and check that our choice stay consistent. The fourth layer is calculate risk index. Using those weights, every road segment in Guelph received a single score that sum up its overall risk. The score is the bridge from the raw data to something we can act on. And finally, at the top of the pyramid comes ranking and visualization. We sort the segments from highest risk to lowest, then turn the list into a color-coded map so staff, council, and residents can see the trouble spot at a glance. That's the bird's eye view. In the next few slides, we will zoom into each layer, starting with how we choose the criteria and walk through the key decisions and findings. So keep these pyramids in mind, the backbone, and let's step onto the first layer. Coming off the framework pyramid, we are ready to step onto the first layer, deciding what goes into the model. Think of these 4 gears on the screen as the core ingredients that make the whole machine turn. Starting on the left, the dark teal gear represents collisions by involved user and injury. Here we look not just at how many collisions happened, but who got hurt and how badly, whether that was drivers, people biking, people walking, or even in terms of the injury level, whether that was minimal, minor, serious, or even fatality. In total, 20 categories are considered as the sub-criteria. Those details let us focus on most severe people-centered outcomes, not just raw numbers. Sliding over to the red gear, we have traffic volume by user type. A busy road used mostly by vehicle carries a different kind of risk than a neighborhood street full of cyclists and or pedestrians. So we broke volume out by drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians to capture those nuances. The gray gear is average vehicle speed. The speed is the physics in the room. Higher speed make every mistake more deadly. So we use speed studies and posted limit to gauge the everyday speed environment on each segment. Finally, the gold gear stands for equity factors. We ask who lives along these roads and how bears the brunt of the risk. By overlaying census data, we can be sure the model flags area where vulnerable communities overlap with high collision potential. Those four gears spin together, and these criteria fit the weighting exercise you will see in the next step. So that's the substance behind the word criteria in the pyramid. With this factor locked in, our next challenge was to wrangle the data itself, clean it, align the scales, and get it ready for numbers crunching. So let's move to the next slide and see how we did that. As you can see here, we have agreed on the four big gears that define risk. So the next job is to find the numbers that makes those gears turn. That takes us to the middle panel of the process, which was data preparation and normalization. So there are three main sources of data used for this analysis. The first source of data is collision data, which includes every reported collisions from 2018 through 2022, broken down by severity and by the people involved. Second source is operation data. This is where the magic of location-based services, or LBS, comes in. At this point, I will bring up the slide image you can see on the screen. So yeah. On the left, a map with a handful of green dots. That's the traditional word of physical bike counters. On the right, the same city lit up in neon green lines. That's cell phone trace data giving us continuous coverage. So the takeaway I want you to see is the coverage. LBS fills in the gaps we could never afford to count with tubes or even cameras alone. It gives us average daily volumes, speed profiles, even by mode split. Ideally, for the operation data, we need to consider the current year data. However, due to data availability limitation, we have to consider the latest available data, which is related to 2021 for our analysis. If you can go to the next slide, please. So yeah, the third source is demographic data pulled from the 2021 census, things like the share of low-income households and older adults along each road. Now, once the data were collected, we had to put everything into the same mold. So the center block on the slide shows how we did that. We wrote a quick script that chopped the entire Guelph road network into 1 kilometer pieces. As mentioned earlier, there is no hard and fast rule on segment lengths, and it needs to be decided based on the needs of jurisdiction. In our case, since we wanted to use the map as a first communication tool, we decided to keep it as little big longer lengths to make a reasonable network. Then we used a geospatial join to pin every collision, every speed readings, every census block to the segment it belongs to. Intersection collisions were assigned to every road they touch so they don't vanish in the sims. Finally, on the right, we scaled every column, collisions, volume, speeds, equity scores, to a simple range of 0 to 1. This is the important part as all the factors are not from the same scale. And if we proceed without normalization, we won't be able to compare the segments as apple to apple. What drops out the other end is a clean segment by segment database, the fuel we need for the weighting exercise. So the data are scrubbed, stacked, and speaking the same language. Our next task is to decide how loudly each variable should speak. The decision happens in an analytical hierarchical process, and that's where we handle on the next slide. We now have a tidy segment by segment data set, but the numbers are still whispering. They don't yet tell us which factor speaks the loudest. This is where the analytical hierarchical process, or AHP, comes in. Think of AHP as a structured group conversation, such as the right side picture that will be turned into a spreadsheet. At the top, we place our single goal, which is here to identify the segments that pose the highest safety risk for Guelph. Just below that sit the criteria and sub-criteria that we have defined earlier. And the criteria would sit the individual road segments or the alternatives that we are going to compare them. The magic happens in the middle tier, where we compare the criteria two at a time. We literally ask questions like, when your objective is safety, is collision history more important than speed? And if so, by how much? Each answer drops into a pairwise comparison matrix, and the math converts those answers into weight that sum to 1. HB also check its own homework. If you stated preference started to conflict with each other, the model flashes red lights and asks for a rethink. The consistency check keeps the weighting process transparent and defendable when we take the results. In a second, I will show you the simple 1 to 9 scale we use for the comparison. But before I flip the slide, keep one thought in mind. We didn't set these weights in a back room. We ran the exercise with the project team and then validated the results with the rest of our team to be sure the numbers aligned with the city values. Next slide, please. Yes. Let's look quickly at that 1 to 9 scale to see let's look quickly at that 1 to 9 scale so you can see how the scoring conversation actually works. This table is the entire vocabulary of an HP comparison, just 9 words and 9 numbers. A 1 means the 2 criteria are equally important. A 3 means 1 is moderately more important. A 5 is a strong preference, and so up to 9, which means 1 criteria is absolutely more important than the other. In practice, the discussion sounds like this. On a scale of 1 to 9, how much more weight should severe injury collisions have than average vehicle speed, as an example? We've worked our way through each pair the same way: speed versus volume, equity versus collisions, equity versus speed, and so on. And the model converted the finished matrix into clean numeric weight plus a consistency score. Ours landed well inside the acceptable range, meaning the judgment lined up logically. With the weights now locked in, every road segment has the ingredient it needs for a single composite score. On the next slide, I will show you how those weights values roll together into a risk index and what the numbers look like across the city network. We just finished turning professional judgment into numbers with HP, so every criterion now carries its own weights. All that's left is to let the math do the work. Here's the recipe. No more complicated than a weighted average divided by the segment lengths you would see on the report card. So we repeated the multiplication for each of the criteria and sub-criteria and add the results. The beauty is that the unit disappear where we are no longer juggling crashes, volumes, speed, or equity percentages. Everything collapses into a single dial we can rank, map, and crucially compare year over year as new data roll in. So with every segment now tagged with its own risk index, the next logical question is, where are the hottest spots? Let's move to the final step, ranking and visualization, and see what the map of Guelph reveals. Okay, so we are generated a risk index for every kilometer of roadway. So the next step is to decide where we draw the line between high risk and everything else. There is no standard for the breakpoint, so we turn to some basic statistics to keep the choice transparent and reproducible. Firstly, we built the master list. We sorted all segments from the largest risk index to the smallest. Then tested a few statistical cut points, including mean, which is the simple average, We tried the median, which is the 50th percentile, standard deviation bands, such as 1 sigma above mean. And also we tried different fixed quantities like top 10%, 15%, 20%, and so on. So we ran each of these moments through the map to see how many kilometers would light up and whether the pattern felt actionable. We consider a purpose-built threshold selection based on our two needs. Firstly, on the left is our internal map. Here, our internal teams want wide funnels so we don't miss emerging issues. We set the breakpoint fairly low. Next, on the right is the public map. For residents, the message needs to be crisp. So we selected the threshold back to the plain mean, the average risk index score across all the segments. Anything above the average shows up in red or yellow dashed. The logic is easy to explain. If a segment's score is higher than the city-wide average, you will see it highlighted here. Because the cut points are statistical, there is no carved in stone. When we refresh the data next year, the mean may shift a bit, and the map would refresh automatically, so no manual recalibration needed. So the headline is this: we use statistics to set dynamic, audience-specific threshold, rigorous enough for engineers, simple enough for the public. With those thresholds set, I will pass it over to Nico to zoom into on the actions that we would use high-risk network resolve for them.
So now that we have it, how are we actually using it? Like I said before, we have about 10. We have 10 of our 68 Vision Zero actions that reference the high-risk network, and I'll mention a few of them right here. Incorporate the high-risk network into the City of Guelph's capital plan prioritization process. We want to make sure that risk is a factor that helps us prioritize what gets built. So how do we do that? We're still trying to work on that, but we want to make sure that we're working towards that goal. Host public engagement events with residents who live or work near the high-risk network to better understand and respond to road safety concerns and mobility needs. It's not enough to just identify risk. You need to know about people's concerns, what their concerns are, and how they travel around to make changes that work best. Perform road safety audits in areas identified as priorities with a high-risk network or in advance of road design or reconstruction. And lastly, to expand community safety zone designation beyond school zones to align with a high-risk network. I'm happy to say this one was achieved a few months ago. Our new community safety zone policy, which also allows the installation of automated speed enforcement cameras, is now expanded to incorporate roadways of the highest risk according to the high-risk network. Also, our Vision Zero action plan has 6 key performance indicators, 2 of which are the number of safety improvements installed on the high-risk network per year and percentage of change in vehicle speeds along the high-risk network. Back to you, Reza.
Okay, we have made good headway with version 1 of the high-risk network, but we also know exactly where the model needs to grow. Let me walk you through 4 key gaps and how we plan to close them. And then we'll end with a call to action. So the first limitation is expert judgment weights. Right now, the HP weights mirror professional experience. That's a solid start, yet we owe the model a reality check. So in high-risk network version 2, we will run the same data through empirical base and safety performance functions lenses, then compare which approach flags the most collisions we haven't yet treated. The second limitation is fixed 1 kilometer segmentation. Hotspots don't respect rulers. A rigid 1 kilometer grid can water down a crash patterns or split it across 2 cells. So the next release will break segments dynamically. Whenever intersection spacing, land use change, or a spike in crash density signals we should. The third limitation would be limited equity lens. So far, we capture low-income households and older adults, but missing are children's, newcomers, disabilities, race proxies, and more. So we're already sourcing those data sets, and we'll rerun the weighting workshop with community representatives to keep the equity voice front and center. And last but not least, limitation is need for broader collaboration. So up to now, the work has lived inside the city. We are interested to work with broader groups such as various cities, researchers, and even other data providers such as public health. So having that, I will pass it over to Nico to give more details about the way of collaboration.
Thanks, Reza. Our goal is to improve this methodology and make it replicable across Canada. Just like it was done in the States, by working together, we help each other identify risk wherever it lives. This is our first call to that, okay? So here it is. We would like to invite you, all attending, to join us, anyone else who is interested in creating and improving high-risk networks, to join the first ever high-risk network working group. City of Guelph, we will host the first meeting. And if nothing else, it's a chance to chat a bit more about this in more in depth with other people, similar-minded folks as well. However, if there is interest, the best case is that we end up with a powerful public methodology that can be applied across Canada. Please consider reaching out to Reza or myself if you would like to take part. Our emails are there. Thank you so much for your time, and we're looking forward to chatting a bit more with your questions. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much. Very interesting work that you're doing. It's very exciting, the new approach. As you say, there's not a lot of other jurisdictions doing this in Canada. And thank you for that invitation as well. So I think because of the response of the numbers of people signing up for today, there's a lot of people interested in this. So I think you're going to get some definite connections with others after this. So now is the question and answer part of our webinar. And we do have a few questions that have come in, but I just also want to remind people to submit your questions through the Q&A area at the bottom of your screen. So our first question is, do you use the non-reportable collisions too in the analysis as they are PDO collisions?
Is the question, I mean, maybe Reza, you can jump on this first, but I'm wondering if we do include PDO, but there's other ways that other municipalities have tried to capture undocumented collisions. So on using web maps, for example, specifically for cyclists. So I'm not sure if they're talking about something we don't have or a PDO which does not have an injury level, but we do capture property damage only.
Yeah, just as a comment, so I think they're talking about the injury level within the motor vehicle collision report. There is a category of non-reportable collisions. So yes, we still consider those ones as the PDO within our analysis. However, that's just the non-reportable, which are reported to the police. We have lots of collisions happened which are not reported, so we have not included those ones in the analysis.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And next question is, can you provide some examples of the factors that create increased risk on a road or at an intersection?
Yeah. I think we can kind of talk to each of these. I think,
Perfect.
yeah, I mean, the one that we really tried to capture was the relationship between vulnerable road users, specifically pedestrians and people who cycle, and vehicle volume and vehicle speed. I know that there's lots of research out there that talks about, well, if there's a lot of pedestrians, and then that will definitely slow vehicles down. I think on a macro scale, based on the research I've seen, at a macro level, of a whole city level, that is true. But at site specifics, I have not seen that to be the case. So we are really looking for places where there's high volume of vehicles, the vehicles are moving quite fast. And there's people who are outside of cars, namely people who are walking or biking. So looking at ways that those were some of our most prized factors, I'd say. I think Reza was talking about that we had to kind of do a little bit of a balancing act of like, well, using some of these modeling processes is like, well, out of all these ones, which ones are more important? Like, are they absolutely important, or is there one a little bit more? So, just as an example, and I don't have the answer off the top of my head, is vehicle speed, is a higher vehicle speed on a segment, is that more of an impact to the safety than a pedestrian, a collision that involves a pedestrian? Or is a minor collision involving a vehicle, is that not as important as a proportion of percentage of the population that is low income? So we had to answer all these questions. We knew the factors related to each other, so we had to make some decisions about which ones were more and less important related to a risk factor. Maybe I'll say a few other things is that there was lots of risk factors related to equity. I think we played around a little bit with the Canadian Index for Multiple Death Privations, the Ontario Marginalization Index, which is kind of a agglomeration of a large number of demographic details. And I think speaking with some other researchers, the ones that we were drawn to mostly were population that were older 65. If you're older than 65, there's a significant more severe likely that a collision will end up being much more severe collision for you and fatal compared to any population that is younger than that. So that was important. Low income was another one that was important, but not the reasons are complex for this. It's not necessarily that a population as low income lives nearby a road that therefore they are walking more, they're taking buses more because they don't own a car, they're taking public transit more. It's also that historically some areas that have traditionally have lower income areas have been underrepresented in terms of our infrastructure, protected bicycle infrastructure, for example, sidewalks, for example. So there's a number of factors that were come into play, but one was low income population.
Okay, perfect. And actually, a question that came up in my mind was around the speed factor that you factored into your model. Now, is that measured speed or is that the speed limit? Did you actually have someone measure the speed of the vehicles that were going along roads, or was that just the posted speed?
Yeah,
Yeah, go for
I
it.
can take that question. So we use the average operational speed, and we used location-based services data, which is coming from the cell phone data. We know that the cell phone data are not super accurate, but still that's a good indication. And also because within the model, we are not going to use the absolute number from the speed. We are converting everything to the scale of 0 and 1. So if it's still that's underreported at one segment, we suppose that would be the same case for the other segments. So we can compare like as apple to apple as well.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Yeah, so we don't
Okay.
use speed limit. We
Yeah,
try
that's
track.
good.
Yeah.
Because I would have thought that would have been a big factor is speed, obviously. So, okay, I'm going to look back to the questions here. So, is this analysis limited to just local roads, or are we also looking at regional roads?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think if you look at Vision Zero Network, one of their suggestions is really to expand your understanding and capture state roads or federal roads. That's from American terminology. For us, because we were creating a Vision Zero action plan, we were trying to emphasize roads that the city of Guelph had jurisdiction over. So we have a main provincial road that cuts right through the city of Guelph, and we took collisions and other data sets that would be involved. The Halen Expressway, it's called. We took those out. So these are only roads that are publicly owned by the city of Guelph.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And there's a couple of comments in there about what is reportable and what isn't with respect to property damage. So if people just want to review that just for their own information, that would be great. I also have a couple other questions from our executive administrator, who's also in a PhD program in transportation engineering. And she said, how did you resolve ambiguity when allocating intersection collisions to roadway segments? So I guess mid-block or intersections, or how did you come up, or yeah,
Okay,
allocate
so
them?
I can take that question and then maybe Nico add if he has any. So for the intersection, as we mentioned, there is no standard and allocating the intersection collisions. So at some municipalities, some jurisdiction in the state, they just develop the model separately for intersections and mid block. And sometimes we saw that they are going to combine and merge the intersection collisions to the mid block. So even for merging the collision from intersection to the mid block, there are different ways. You can either assign just to one segment based on minor or major street, or you can assign to both segments cross or both network cross the intersection. So in our case, we assign to both segments. It's not going to duplicate the collisions, but still that would be useful just to consider collisions happen at the intersection as part of both corridors. So this is the approach and logic that we followed, and we assigned the collisions from the intersections to both segments cross that intersection.
Yeah, and I'll just add
Perfect.
that looking through other methodologies, especially from the States, there's a wide variety of approaches. Sometimes they would take a collision, for example, and they would kind of cut it in two on like a minor and a collector road, or other ones would say, if it happens as a collision, it means there's a higher risk at each of these intersections. So they would kind of multiply it by four. Other ones just separated. They only did mid-block kind of analysis, and other ones did intersections. So there's wide variety, and also our data sets in the States, they actually define if a collision at an intersection was on a minor road or major road. So it's a little bit easier to define that way. So all to say there's a wide variety of approaches.
Yeah, and along those same lines, just in terms of your methods and I guess what your plans are to continue this. So how frequently will this be updated? And also, as you get new data sets or new data sources, as you said, you're looking into other ones to do with equity, or if you change your decision about how to assign, like how often are you going to be kind of looking at your methodology and the data sets and updating each or both of those?
Yeah, good question. I think maybe to start, this was the first time we promoted the high risk network publicly. We'll
Yep.
probably do some sort of more of a specific launch to kind of explain some of this work in plain language to people to explain the public map. The update to something that is more public facing will probably be done, the next larger update to the Vision Zero, maybe 3, 4, 5 years. But internally, the changes can be made very quickly. So we're trying to use this as a guiding our own policy work, and we're creating policies that allow us the flexibility to say, well, based on the current high risk network, let's look at the threshold that lives at the top and see how that mixes with other things. So I could see us updating these fairly recently, even small things like segment length to adding a new data set. We can update up these without compromising our work or our policies or standards of practice.
Very good. And there's another question. Will you evaluate the impact on collisions, injuries of changes made to streets based on the risk analysis? That's a great question.
Yeah, we have incorporated the high risk network, and I recognize as I explained it, it's kind of loosely defined, and the specific details of how is the high risk network defined in this KPI specifically? Because I just said we could change it all the time. So it's a good question. So the answer is yes. We do want to both make sure that we are adding infrastructure that protect vulnerable road users specifically on the high risk network, and also that we are reviewing the speeds over time, and those would inform our KPIs as well.
Okay,
So
very
yeah, that would be our evaluation.
Very good. Well, while I'm waiting for other questions to come in, I did have a question about the data, and the network is only as good as the injury data and the volume data that you have. And with respect to volume data, with pedestrians and cyclists, for instance, we know that those are undercounted in terms of volume. And you mentioned a street light. I don't know, is that a source that you have tapped into? I forget where I saw that. But but I guess just getting back to that, like how do you capture that kind of volume data?
Do you want to take a question, Nico? Okay, so I can go. So Streetlight is a vendor that we're already working with them at the city of Guelph. So they are
Okay.
collecting the location-based services data coming from cell phones, from GPS, Wi-Fi's, Bluetooth. So they're capturing all those data together, and based on the back-end AI model, they are going to do the estimation for the actual traffic counts by user involved based on the sample size that they are capturing from those location-based services.
Okay, very good. And in terms of the injury data, you had mentioned accessing other sources in addition to the ones that are reported in police services, that there was some other source. Can you elaborate on that a bit more?
Yeah, I mean, I think our call is to look for other data sources, and I
Yeah.
say that with a bit of a heavy heart because I know how difficult it is. We One thing that we've tried to do is kind of work as much as we can with emergency department and public health data. So we were at least able to see that our own collision data was underreported, at least for people who ride bicycles, by 30%, based on the same factors. And we reviewed this with the hospital as well. However, that doesn't hospital data, because of privacy laws, are not geolocated. So we don't know where those collisions happened. If you went to the emergency department and you were hit by, when you were on a bike, we don't know where that actually happened. In the States, they do a lot more investigation, work with public health in their hospitals to kind of be a bit more specific for figuring out where that information lives. So technically, we're looking for more information, but we're also kind of running into some challenges. I think just other types of data sets that we haven't pursued, of course, like qualitative, like more proactive qualitative data. So as much as like so many of our policies are reactive to complaints, and another interpretation of that is actually go to areas you suspect are higher risk and talk to people as much as you can to figure out
Mhm.
what areas they perceive as higher risk according to them, according to specific road users as well.
Yeah, it's a great point. Um, I just wondered, Myovision is doing a lot of work on the whole near misses and collecting that kind of data. And um, I believe there's a report that's coming out today by the CAA where they did a study across Canada of these near misses. And I believe that the city of Guelph is one of those sites. Do you have any plans to incorporate that data into your model?
Yes, as a short answer,
Okay.
we have the plan to
Okay.
incorporate any near miss data. However, like so far, we have not done, except that pilot project that we collaborated with CIA, we have not collected too many near misses data on the roads. But that's definitely one of the actions, and I believe one of the actions identified is based on like doing proactive road safety analysis based on near miss data. So we need to collect more data. And whenever we reach to the amount of data that would be enough for those kind of analysis, for sure, we're going to incorporate those ones as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
very good.
I think Myovision is very site specific, which is great. And we've done some preliminary work to see, wow, like in our downtown city of Guelph, we can see, oh, there was actually a near miss here with a pedestrian crossing the street. We would never have caught that. How did that person cross? So we can kind of see how people move around certain intersections. I'd like to see it where the high risk network informs our lens in some way. So we see this area. It's not necessarily that there's been a high number of collisions, but we know that there's a high risk here. So what can we set up? Can we use Myovision to set up and just analyze the situation to see near miss, to see how people are turning? So that would be a use of it for sure.
Okay, very good. You mentioned before when we were first introducing these methods, the high injury networks and also the high risk networks, that there is no, well, particularly with the high risk network, there's no standardized, I guess, types of criteria and even possibly the approach to developing it. And I just wondered, since there's so much work going on in the United States, and given the increased interest in Canada, do you see the possibility of coming up with a standardized approach, or is that even something that we should be striving for? Like our communities so different from each other that each one does need to have its own, but maybe you could come up with, some particular criteria that are very strongly related that would cross all different, be applicable to all jurisdictions.
I I champion CARSP and you, Brenda, to help us find those partners at the
Okay.
federal and provincial level. So yes, like there's a few excellent resources from I think the Southern California Transportation Agency and also the state of Oregon, who basically was like, okay, Portland, you've done your high injury network or whatever. Like, let's just make sure we're all on the same page with moving this forward. So let's make sure we all clear about what it is. We all have the same data, so how can we best use this? And what standards are we recommending? And that would be excellent for somebody from the federal government or from each province to kind of direct municipalities because to have the technical capacity to do these type of coding work, it's quite advanced, especially for smaller municipalities who might have cell phone data, but doesn't have the
Mhm.
budget to hire a private firm to capture that data or a data analyst. This stuff would be very helpful, especially for mid to smaller sized municipalities. So I strongly urge the federal government to kind of consider high risk networks and high injury networks and hire academic institutions to come up with a methodology that is based on statistical significance
Mhm.
and works. So try to find something that works within province and also for every province, because of course every province is the one who captures a lot of this data, and everybody does it a little bit differently. So I believe that there could be some fundamentals, but probably the best case would be each province kind of supports the development of a high injury or high risk networks.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that would be an excellent idea. And we'd love to invite you back and just hear how it's coming along. And um, also, we'll have a recording of this webinar on our website. So if those of you are out there that are listening, if you want to share this with any people that you think need to hear this, maybe we can make some change and some movement in that direction of what just Nico just said. But yeah, we'd definitely love to have you back and hear how it's progressing. And there is their emails. So once again, they put out that call that if you're interested in collaborating with them, or even just meeting and chatting and hearing about what each of you are doing, and if you had any other questions that you wanted to pose to them, please reach out to them. Also, just another reminder about our post-webinar survey. Uh, my assistant Homa put it into the chat, and it's at the very beginning of the chat. So if you just scroll up, you'll see the link there. So please fill that out. Just takes a couple minutes, and you could win a $25 Tim's gift card. So yeah, and I just want to thank you again, Nico and Reza. Excellent presentation, very inspiring, excellent work, and I'm just so excited to see where this takes you. And I will be checking in with you. So yeah, just any other last words before you leave?
I mean, I'll say
No?
the collaboration amongst municipalities to get us to where we were today was necessary. So I really want to say a shout out to some people, specifically from the city of Edmonton and also from the city of Toronto, for figuring out how to do this and what might work for our own purposes. All the researchers were also involved. So I do want to support other like the University of Waterloo and TMU also for their help in developing this as well.
Excellent. Shout out to TMU and University of Waterloo. Awesome. Okay, and Toronto, sorry. Okay, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Take
Bye.
care.